Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Jacob and Jacob podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Rovam, joined as always by my co-host, Jacob Hare. And today we have a very special guest, NBC Sports' Liam McHugh. Liam, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. How's everything?
Pretty good. Life is opening up a little bit, so that's good. How's everything with you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. We're every day's a little bit better. It's getting a little warmer, and you guys are still doing virtual school. My kids are in school right now, so you'll be there soon, which is good.
That's good to hear.
So let's get started with the questions. So you, of course, are in the sports broadcasting industry. Why did you choose to go into that?
I was first actually in sports writing prior to being a sports broadcaster, and I worked for a newspaper on Long Island called Newsday, and then I briefly worked for ESPN magazine back when, it was a long time ago, guys, but ESPN magazine used to be like a phone book. It was massive. And as I was, during my brief time there, I watched it shrink, and print was kind of going away. The newspaper was getting thinner, and it just felt like a cue where I kind of wanted to try broadcasting, always wanted to give it a shot. And now this was a sign, jobs are kind of going away here. It was before the sort of internet writing bubble. People didn't know how secure a lot of those jobs are going to be. So I talked to a few people at both jobs. They thought it would be a good idea, which I guess also tells you how poor of a writer they thought I was, because they were like, yeah, go ahead. This is probably, you've done all you can do here. So I went back to school, went to Syracuse, which was great because it was the type of place that, 1 year intensive and really prepares you to go out, do a job, and do the job from top to bottom, to be able to write, edit, produce, as if you really don't have any help. You're in a small market and you can just put a sportscast on TV. So it was, I don't know, it was a strange change, but it's been a really good one, and it's kind of been a wild ride since then.
Nowadays, would you recommend anyone to get into the sports writing industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are still good avenues. I really do. I worry about local avenues because we're seeing a lot of local papers go away, and that's a shame because I think you really rely on those people to find out what's happening in your area and to get the real news about your area. So I worry about that. My hope is that some of these places are still going to survive, and that maybe in the future some people are going to buy these places and let them thrive. And I think there are still avenues that are really important in that. It's tricky. There aren't as many jobs, and you even see the best sports writers a lot move around, right? They're trying to find, where they can have stability, where they can really exercise their voice. So it's trickier now. And I think the difference is, and I watched this, firsthand, where I watched older sports writers try to adapt to this digital world, where you got into it and you were a writer, or you were a columnist, or you're a reporter. Now you're all of those things, plus you're online, plus you're hosting a podcast, plus you got to learn how to shoot video. It's different now, and I think if you're aware of all that and you're comfortable with all of that, then it's still a really good avenue. But it's trickier, and the problem is, I think, even guys, your age, you've seen it change so much, the whole sports industry, that to predict where it's going to be in 5 years is really difficult.
Yeah.
So when I give advice, it's always take it with a grain of salt, because that's what I'm seeing right now. And 2 weeks from now, it could be totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. So talking more about you, when you first started with NBC Sports, you started covering the NHL. Was hockey your preference to cover, or did you have other ideas?
No, I was more of a casual fan, if I'm being completely honest. It was more that they had the opening there. And this was at a time where I was, I've been working at a job at Versus, which became NBC Sports. I was still under contract with them as the transition was happening. And I think the idea was, let's give them a chance in something that we want to promote in hockey, and let's see how it goes. So for me, it was one of those sink or swim moments. Imagine cramming for a test, but then every single night after that, cramming for another test. That's kind of how I felt. Because, hockey fans are devout. Yeah. So they're not interested in you flubbing names, apologizing, and then moving on. You got to get it right or you lose credibility. So for me, it was challenging, but I'll say this, and I think this goes regardless of what job you're going to do. If you don't have good teammates, you're not going to succeed. And I had great teammates, and I still get to work with one of them now. I've been working with Keith Jones this entire time, and you guys are in the Philly area.
Yeah, of course, same every night on the Flyers broadcast. So
Jonesy's the man, and he's been great with me. You know, he knows he's got encyclopedic knowledge of the sport, and he's willing to share it. And that was such a big help. Where I think he understood that I knew TV. I was going to make him look as good as he possibly could be, get the best out of him. And he was going to help me along with the details and the nuances of the game. And it's been a great relationship. I still love working with him. But no, man, I was more of a casual fan in a sport where there are not a lot of just casual fans. There are hardcore fans. And now the best part, I love it. I really do. But I would also say that part of that is because before I started working at Versus and then NBC, I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, local stations. And, that's a lot of years where we're just not covering hockey. It's Indiana, it's Oklahoma, maybe we're showing highlights of the Stanley Cup final, but we're not covering it day to day. They'd rather know what high school kid has been recruited by Oklahoma or Oklahoma State. It's just a different world. But I don't know. I'm thrilled that now I'm a real part of hockey. I love the sport. I love the people. And, like I said, getting to work with a guy like Jonesy has been fantastic.
So you mentioned Jonesy. Has he got you to root for the Flyers a little bit?
I'll say he's got me interested more in the Flyers. I'm not going to start rooting. I grew up on Long Island. I now live back on Long Island. I'm a New York guy. I'm not rooting for Philly teams.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just not going to happen. Although I would say this, I've boys who are second grade and first grade, and they're doing that thing where they're trying to figure out like, who am I rooting for here? And I have like the one boy who's like, who does dad root for? I'll root for them. And the other boy who's like, who does dad root for? I'm going to root for anyone else. Making that decision right now. I would much rather that they choose a Philadelphia team than like, I'm a Mets fan. If they come home and they're Yankees fans, like, I don't want anything to do with that. Like, they won't be a Phillies fan before that. And I don't really, the Phillies as a Mets fan doesn't feel great either. But I have a deeper appreciation of Philadelphia sports because I hear about it all the time from Jonesy, who wants to talk about it. Whether it's the Flyers, whether it's people giving Embiid a hard time. It's good to have someone to bounce things off of. But no, I don't think I'll be rooting for the Flyers anytime soon.
Does Keith Jones ever sleep? One night I see him on the Flyers game. The next night he's back on NHL on NBC, and then back to the Flyers the next night.
It's wild. He and his schedule is crazier now because with COVID-19 they keep switching games and keep postponing things. So he thinks he's got a handle on it, then he's somewhere else doing something else the next night. When we first started working, especially during the playoffs, it was a big issue because we do these double headers and then we do a post-game show and we're on at 2 a.m. And if there's a triple overtime game for the last game, you just go you're there until And then he would get in a car and go to Philly, and we're in Connecticut for that. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, in 2 hours, I'm on the air for morning radio. Oh my God, sounds horrible. It's like, weren't you a professional athlete for a long time? Did you have to live this existence? But I think Jonesy, while he claims he loves his downtime, I think he loves this. I think he loves the wind me up, let me go, and just keep things moving the entire time. He's got incredible energy and he's got a great passion for everything. So there's no sleeping for that guy.
So let's get into a little bit of hockey talk with the NHL this season. Season off, up and running finally after the long wait since the bubble. But when you look at teams this year, which teams have surprised you the most and which teams have sort of disappointed you?
Well, let's see. I would say I'm certainly a little surprised by Toronto, but it's tough to get a read on them because we're in this strictly play your division schedule. And my co-hosts, like Jonesy, like Dominic Moore, who we added this year, and Anson Carter, Patrick Sharp, I think they're telling me they're really buying into Toronto. They like it defensively. They think the goaltending's a little bit better. I don't know that I believe it until I see it against teams outside that division, which we're not going to see, unless they get to unless they get to this new NHL version of the Final Four, right? Yeah. I also don't know that, that they're playing postseason type hockey. I still think they're an electric scoring team. And while they may be better defensively, like I need a team that can win ugly in the playoffs. I need that, which is why I would say that I'm pleasantly surprised at what the Islanders are doing, because it feels like the Islanders are a postseason team and should struggle in the regular season. But they found this nice blend. Now, part of that is you play the Sabres 6 times and you beat the Sabres 6 times. You have to beat the bad teams, and the Islanders have done that. So they've been a pleasant surprise. Toronto, I'm a little on the fence about. The Blackhawks, very surprising. I did not think they'd be this good. I'm amazed at what Patrick Kane is doing. I really am. He's 32 years old. This is 14 years in the season. He's not this big frame. You'd expect that, like, a guy, even if he gets hit just a couple times a year, he'd wear down. He'd start to slow down. Kane is still electric. He's still a dynamic player, and he's elevating a team that I did not think would be competitive this year. And it looks like, I don't know if they're going to make it, but they are one of 5 teams that are battling for, 4 spots. So I would say the Blackhawks have surprised me. And then disappointments, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people want to jump on the Rangers as a disappointment. To me, they were playing above their level before we stopped last time around. Mika Zibanejad is not going to be scoring 5 goals a game. It's just not going to continue. I would say the Flyers, I thought, while they're okay points-wise, I thought they'd be a little bit better. I really did. I thought the Flyers would take a next step. Carter Hart's had his struggles this year, but I like Carter Hart mentally. I do think he's a postseason goalie. And then otherwise than that, the biggest disappointment, and I'll bring it up as someone who went to the University of Buffalo, the Buffalo Sabres are a colossal disappointment. People ask me about them all the time because of my ties to the area. And I told people that I thought they'd be much, much better, but probably still miss the playoffs just because of the division they were in. But they're going to be competitive. They'll be right there to the end. And they're the worst team in the league. They don't have the worst roster in the league, but they are the worst team in the league. And that, to me, makes them the biggest disappointment. And now they're feeling the heat, because when you're in a town that has the Buffalo Bills, that now looks like a team that can compete for Super Bowls, you're going to be feeling it. You're going to be hearing about it. That's a passionate fan base, and they deserve a winner, and they have the longest playoff drought in hockey right now. So it's a shame, but I thought they'd be a lot better, and it's been an ugly, ugly season for Buffalo.
All right, so I got to ask you a question. Let's say you're the Buffalo Sabres GM for one day. What's the one move that you're making?
I'm not trading Eichel.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm very tempted right away to make a coaching change.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like, I don't know that a coaching change changes much this season, except for maybe it gets some guys playing a little bit harder than they were.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise than that, every single person outside of Jack Eichel is on the market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every single player. And I think you let that be known to the players. Hey, listen, like, we may move any of you. If you do want to stay here, show us something. And I think that's a message that has to be clear. And I think it also sends a message there to Jack Eichel, where it's like, you're a guy, you're a cornerstone. We want to win here, and we want to win here with you. And I think if you send that message loud and clear, which I'm sure they have behind the scenes to Eichel, because I know they want him to stay, that's a big step. But these are easier said than done, right? Because you get into salary cap situations. Skinner makes a ton of money. Taylor Hall has, a no move clause. But I would think Taylor Hall would be the type of guy who would want to go somewhere, showcase his skills in a playoff environment, so that he can make some more money going down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that if your name's not Jack Eichel, just know at any moment we could be dealing you.
Yeah, I think Taylor Hall is definitely a player they should move before the deadline, because it doesn't look like he's going to re-sign there, especially after the way the season went.
Yeah. And, a big part of Taylor Hall was, I think he wanted to play for Ralph Kruger, and it doesn't look like Kruger will probably be part of that future either. So if he's not, Taylor Hall may not be happy there. It looks like it was a 1-year deal. It was a rental, and that's all it'll be. And maybe it'll even be shorter at this point if they move.
So when we look at Hart Trophy picks for this season, obviously McDavid and Matthews right up there. Which other players have you seen that you think are right in that race?
Well, I definitely think Kane is in there. And I think it's the type of situation where if they make the playoffs, and I think it's it's a maybe right now, but if they make the playoffs, he has to factor in. He just has to. Otherwise than that, I mean, I think you can look around the league. It's always difficult for me in teams that are stacked to pick one player out. And I think Tampa Bay is a team that's stacked despite not having Nikita Kucherov, which is amazing. But I think you got to start considering people who aren't forwards for this, right? And Victor Hedman has to be a guy that you consider. Every time I watch him, he stands out. Every single time. He skates so beautifully for a guy his size. He can impose his will. He can score. He leads defensemen in scoring. I think he's a guy that has to deserve some consideration. It's pretty tough for a goaltender to be in that mix. You have to pretty much carry your team, but I think Vasilevsky has been that good. So I would probably put both of those guys in there as well. And then after that, I don't know. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl tend to cancel each other out, but I would say I think McDavid has a legitimate shot here at doing something very special. I mean, it's a shortened season, but he's the type of guy who gets so hot and can score so many points in such a short amount of time. He could potentially lead the league in goals and points in the same season, and he gets his team into the playoffs, which, let's face it, they're a top-heavy team, talent-wise. They're not a deep team. For sure. And he is that type of player. And I always talk about this. I talk about Patrick Kane, and McDavid's clearly another guy where if you just have a sports fan, doesn't understand hockey, but knows sports, and you turn on an Oilers game, a minute into it, they're like, whoa, who is that guy? Like, he's playing a totally different game than everyone else. So McDavid has those magical moments, but yeah, I would say add Kane into that, add a couple of Lightning players, and then we'll see. We have that second half of the season where, listen, I mentioned Mika Zibanejad last year. I mean, Zibanejad was the type of guy, if the season went 82 games, might have found himself right in the mix for, being a Hart Trophy finalist. So a lot can happen in the second half, but, why not? Let's look outside of forwards.
Yep, I agree. Victor Hedman, incredible player. His assists end up getting tipped in by Killorn the other night against Chicago with literally a tenth of a second remaining on the clock in overtime. Was pretty awesome to see. But before we let you go, we got to ask one more question. We got to get your Stanley Cup pick for this season. Give us the matchup and the winner.
Wow. Okay.
And we know it's going to change by the end of the season.
Well, if I'll be honest, we were talking about Jonesy. It would change depending on who I'm talking to. You guys are in Philly. If I was Jonesy, I'd immediately pick the Flyers and just make you happy. And then I'd go on like, I'm in Chicago, I'll pick the Blackhawks. If you go back and all these things are on YouTube, please check up on Jonesy. He's just picking whoever is the hometown team. I would say at this point, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I'm going to say the Islanders.
Okay.
Get in.
We like bold predictions on this.
Yeah. And I don't know. I would say, well, I guess you could potentially have it's all points percentage once you get to that point. So why not go Islanders Lightning? Why not go Islanders Lightning? And I think we get back-to-back Stanley Cups, though. I do think the Lightning win again. I mean, there is this chance that Kucherov could be back for the playoffs, which, I mean, people talk about trade deadline and picking up a player. How about not trading anyone and picking up a former MVP who's just been sitting there trying to recoup from surgery? So I'm going to say the Lightning win it again. And I'm going to say this because I forgot to mention it before. He asked me if Jonesy ever sleeps. Jonesy the other day, about a week ago, drove up from Philadelphia to Connecticut, got in the door, and the producer who was producing the show was walking in at the same time and said, "What are you doing here? You don't work until tomorrow."
Oh. So
Jonesy doesn't know what day it is. He's constantly going, and so Jonesy turned right back around, got back in his car, and drove to Philly. So that's Keith Jones right there. When he should be sleeping, he's still not sleeping.
That's an epic Jonesy story.
Well, Liam, thank you so much again. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
You guys are great. Really appreciate y'all talking to me.
Of course, anytime. Thank you again.
All right. Take care, guys.
Be well. Thank you.
Well.